We're in this series called Freedom, but before I jump into any of that, I gotta introduce you to something that's coming up. We are 11 months old as a church, which means we are almost there to 1 year. And so 1 year is September 25th. That's Sunday. And so we're gonna have a party. It's gonna be the real deal. We're gonna have a lot of fun, and I'm calling it Sock Sunday. And you're like, Sock Sunday. And I apologize to all the grammar people in the room. State of the church. So it's not the state of the church address, it's Sock Sunday. And so we've actually even ordered socks, custom refresh socks for everybody in the room so that we can have some Sock Sunday, have some fun. We'll have a truck out front doing some fun things. We got little things like that. We're gonna make it extra special because you only have the 1 year celebration as a church one time. And so if you have plans that Sunday, just go ahead and cancel them, all right? Like, you don't need to go camping that weekend. Your family will see you. I'm just kidding, I'm joking. But truly, it's gonna be a Sunday that if you are here, come on, it's going to be amazing. If you're on the serve team, I implore you, serve that weekend. It's gonna be really, really special. It's just gonna be it's gonna be big for us as a church. So, and on Sock Sunday, the state of the church, I'm gonna show you where we've been over the last year. And then I'm gonna look forward through the rest of the year. I wanna look through the rest of 2022 and go, okay, what can happen in this year? And then in January, kind of set new vision for the new year. And it's gonna be a great opportunity for us. Now, I met a lot of people who are here for the first time today. On the way in, I was shaking hands. And if I didn't get you or I didn't get enough time with you, I'd love to check out in the back after service. I'll be there in the lobby. I'd love to shake your hand, hear more of your story, learn your name, and spend some time with you. But if you would like to stay connected with Refresh or get connected, we've got these cards you got on the way in. On the bottom is a connect card. You can fill that out by writing if you write neatly. If you don't write neatly like me, just scan the QR code and do it digitally, because then we can actually get a hold of you. You're probably not surprised, but the number of people who are like, please contact me, and then I can't read their email address. Nobody? Yeah, that's me. You can't read my email address. I know you can't. So I got to type that guy out. So, all right. So we're in this series called Freedom, and the whole deal with this entire series, this is week number 4, the final week, the whole thing is that each and every one of us, as we become a Christian, we still have issues. All God's children got issues. Somebody say amen. Amen. You don't even have to raise your hand. I know you got issues. You're human. You have issues. But you don't have to stay with the issues. God wants you to find freedom from the issues, right? We all have hurts. We have hang-ups, we have bad experiences. Maybe that bad experience did come from church or something like that. Maybe it came from some other point in your life, whether it was family or relationships, finances, health, whatever it is. There's some season of your life that's been clinging to you, and maybe you're in it right now and you need to find some freedom. Who loves freedom? I do. Not just freedom like, America, I'm free, right? But like freedom like, I don't care what you do to the outside of me. I'm free no matter what because I'm free in him. That's the kind of freedom we're talking about. The kind of freedom that it doesn't matter if I don't like my job or if bad things are happening to me, because I've never been a part of this world, I've been a part of his. I'm not of this world, I'm of his kingdom, right? I'm walking in a different way because I'm living in a different kind of freedom. And that's what the series has been about. And if you have missed some of this series, it's all on our YouTube channel. You can get it all on our website. And I encourage you, watch it, because this is the theological foundation of why we exist as a church. This is why we're here, to give you freedom, to help you experience what we would call life-giving church. And as a whole, that is our goal. So if you missed any part of the series, I encourage you to go back and watch. And week number 1, we talked about the very beginning, Adam and Eve in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was a great way of looking at, I can go and do things through the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is trying to earn God's approval by doing things perfectly. Or I can just accept the life that he gives. Right? That was week number 1. Week number 2, we talked about grace, like really, truly understanding grace, like grace that is greater And it's not something that I have to earn or work for. In fact, I work out of grace, not for grace. And then week number 3, we covered the mentality that we see our Heavenly Father in. We can see him as a father, or we can see him as a master, which means we see ourselves as sons or slaves, right? And we're not here to try and please an angry God, but we're here actually to walk and journey with a Father who deeply loves us, and there is nothing you could possibly do to make him love you more. He already loves you the most. Doesn't that make you feel good? But so many times, we try to get to God in our own accord, in our own way. And we all make deals with God at times. We're like, hey, God, I need you to come through on this one. And so we take a little prayer time. We're driving to work. We're like, God, the meeting, can you get the sale for me, whatever? I promise I won't miss church next month. I'll do the whole series, the entire series. I'll make it every week. I'll even serve on Sundays. God, could you please just make this happen, right? Like we try to make deals with God. Anybody? What are we trying to do? We're trying to earn something from him. But he already gave everything to us, right? So we can't earn anymore because it's never been able to be bought or purchased with our own ability. And that's what the gospel is. It is the good news of free grace. That's what it is. It's the good news of new life in him. It's the good news of being adopted into the family of God, which means you're not even living and working for the worldly things, but you actually are part of a family that is bigger and beyond what's even in this room. Amen. I'm living for that. And that means I'm free. I don't have to worry about the here and the there. Someone asked me the other day, are you really worried about the future? I was like, why would I be worried about the future? Like, everything could go wrong. But I'm not a citizen of this place. I'm a citizen of heaven, right? I have found that kind of freedom that I can walk in joy no matter what. Somebody say amen. That's what we're doing. All right. We're going to go to the book of Galatians, and this is where we've really been landing this entire series. We're going to wrap it up today. And we're actually going to go to the book of Galatians chapter 2. And Paul is writing a letter to the church in Galatia. That's why it's called Galatians. And Paul started the church. He raised up leaders, and then he moved on. And as he moved on, some other people came in behind him, and they tried to teach these new Gentile or non-Jewish believers that they needed to behave more Jewish. So they're telling them, you got to eat like this, you got to dress like this, and for the guys, you got to do something permanent. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to go any further, do I? Okay, giggle, got it. All right, good. And so here's the deal though. As Paul is there with these people, he's eating with them, he's celebrating with them, and Peter, you guys know who Peter is, right? The disciple. He's kind of a loudmouth, impulsive, but he's also the only one that walked on water, right? That Peter. The Peter that denied Jesus 3 times and was restored into ministry and led the early church and preached the very first sermon in church history, and 3,000 people joined the church that day. That's a great sermon right there, right? Like that Peter. Peter that is free as free can be in the gospel shows up, and he's hanging with Paul and these new believers at one point, and Paul's writing about it. And he's writing about it, and he says this, and I'm going to read it from the Message because it just really flows. Later, when Peter came to Antioch, I had a face-to-face confrontation with him because he was clearly out of line. When I read Paul, when I read the way Paul writes, he kind of sounds like a jerk. Anybody? Like, I'm sure he's a very nice individual, but he's like, I didn't like it, so I said something. Who's got that friend in your friend group? Right? Like maybe it's a Karen and you're like, you gotta cool it, girl, but all of us have the bold one, and you're friends with them, so you don't have to be the bold one, right? Like, sick him, right? Like, you're just like, get him. That's Paul. That's who he is. So I had to call him out. And then he goes, here's the situation. Earlier, before certain persons had come from James, who James was leading the church in Jerusalem, Peter regularly ate with non-Jews. So these people that were outside the Jewish faith, didn't get raised in the Jewish faith, or they were not Hebrew people. They were a different ethnic group, right? They were outside of the Jewish race. He used to eat with them, but they were believers. He would eat with them. But that conservative group came from Jerusalem, and he cautiously pulled back and put as much distance as he could manage between himself and his non-Jewish friends. His people, his friends from Jerusalem showed up, and they were conservative, and he was worried about what they would think of him. You're eating with people like that? Now, before we get too harsh on Peter, do we do things like that? Let me finish the passage, and then we'll get into everybody's business, okay? All right, well, let's finish that. That's how fearful he was of the conservative Jewish clique that's been pushing the old system of circumcision. Unfortunately, the rest of the Jews in Antioch church joined in the hypocrisy so that even Barnabas was swept along in the charade. So this people group that is not Jewish, they're not from the Jewish background, they don't have the lineage, they more than likely worshiped some other gods or religion or something like that, and they came to a saving faith in Jesus. They were filled with the Holy Spirit, and they became free. I mean like free, like we've been talking about free, like wow, I can't believe the amount of grace, the infilling of the Holy Spirit, the joy with which I get to live this life. I cannot believe. And Peter's hanging out, and he's from Jerusalem, and he's like, yes, this is so amazing. God is expanding, and he's reaching new people, and people's lives are absolutely being changed. But then this people from Jerusalem show up and like, oh, they're not good enough to hang out with you. Who grew up in that church? Where they didn't have like ushers, they had like bouncers? Sorry. We give God our best. You have to wear a suit and tie to come in this place. Now, should you give God your best? Yeah, sure. But should you like prevent other people from coming to God because their best is not as good as yours? Right? Like all of us, we grow up and we have this. I remember I started a church in Florida in 2012, and I grew up in an environment that was like a little bit, y'all stay over there because you're not the same as me kind of a group. Like I was a Christian, so I had to act different, and I couldn't be associated with people who were different than me, right? Like, and so when I started the church, I wanted to start a church that was open arms, like people just walk in and hear the gospel and let the gospel deal with whatever's going in their life, right? That's the kind of church I wanted to have. But I'd never grown up in that church. I'd never been a part of a church like that. So I had to learn as I went along. I had to kind of build the airplane as it was flying, so to speak, right? Like I had to figure it out. And people started walking through the doors of our church, and they were lost, and they were broken, and they were living lifestyles that were far from Jesus. But for some reason, they walked through the doors of the church that day. And I got to tell you, I felt a lot like Peter at that time. Am I allowed? Am I allowed to be friends with people that are that far different than me? Am I allowed to associate or hang out with or go to meals? What am I allowed to be seen at a restaurant with someone like, it sounds so petty and wrong, but it happened to me, and I know it's probably happened to you too, right? Oh, I can't be around that person. They are fill in the blank, right? But that's the whole point of the gospel, is because they can't get right to come to him. They come to him to get right. And don't you remember what it was like when you weren't right? Don't you remember what it was like before you knew him and you were growing and your life began to become changed by him? Peter's here going, oh, I gotta separate. Why did he separate? Because he was fearful of what other people thought. He was more afraid of what these people thought than what God thought. And when the fear of people supersedes the fear of God, our life gets out of whack, don't you think? So that's where we find ourselves. And so it's like the first message in this series, we talked about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's like, if we're in the tree of life, we live this life of freedom, this life of grace, this life of a son or a daughter in the kingdom of God. But there's this temptation for us to like hop on the vine and like swing across like a monkey into this other tree. And we find ourselves going, right back to where we came from, right? Into this old mindset. And Peter had gone into the tree of life, but when these other people showed up, he swung right back to this other tree. Anybody else do that? Anybody else ever feel like, man, I'm just not good enough? I'm a believer, but I'm just not good enough. There's a lot of guilt and shame in your life. You know what probably happened? He swung back to the other tree. Because the truth is, he dealt with that. Now, do we have to ask for forgiveness? Sure. Do we repent? Yes. Do we turn away? Absolutely. But usually what happens is we get in the other tree. And I realized that when I was starting that first church of ours, that I had swung into a tree, or I had been stuck in that tree, or I was just in that tree going, there's this wrong and that wrong, and I'm trying to do all the things perfect. If you know me, my personality is to do things perfectly. I don't want to do things imperfectly because I might not do them at all, right? Like it's either a win or I don't do it. Anybody else? So I'm an overcoming person. I'm trying to overcome my imperfections of being a perfectionist. Anybody? Come on, somebody, right? And so I was in the wrong tree, and Peter was in the wrong tree, and Paul says, you're in the wrong tree to Peter. And I think all of us kind of find ourselves in that situation, don't you? Sometimes you're condemning yourself in that way. It's because we've been living in the wrong tree. So how do we keep from going back? How do we keep from swinging back and forth and back and forth? And so this message, I want to dedicate to the people who are just like me. The ones that feel like, if I could just become more perfect, God would like me more. If I could just do more good things, God would bless me more. If I could just mess up less, I would have less mess in my life. If I could just do that, maybe God would actually look at me and smile on me in some capacity. I don't know about you, that's how I have seen life a lot. But I'm dedicating this message to you because I want us to swing to that other tree. The tree that says life and life abundantly. Life that never runs out. Freedom that walks you through every hardship of life, and it doesn't matter what's happening around you, you're free anyway. That's who I'm dedicating this message to. And if you're already free, God bless you. I appreciate you. We're working on it, the rest of us, okay? All right, Galatians chapter 2, verse 16, it continues. He writes about this interaction. We know very well that we are not set right with God by rule keeping, but only through personal faith in Jesus Christ. How do we know? How do we know that the rule keeping doesn't work? We tried it. How's it working for you? It's not. If I every time I try to be perfect, I end up being imperfect. Anybody? But we have, and then he goes, and we have the best system of rules the world has ever seen. Growing up as a Jewish boy, right? He's like, we had rule upon rule upon rule. We had written rules, we had unwritten rules, we had traditional rules, we had every single rule there was. And we tried it, and it didn't work. I was no better off trying to pursue perfection and convinced that no human being can please God by self-improvement. We believed in Jesus as the Messiah so that we might be set right before God by trusting in the Messiah, not by trying to be good. Now that is 100% countercultural to our North American brand of Christianity. Because we say, well, if I'm good enough, God, I'm just gonna go to heaven. I'm a good person. I don't think any one of us in this room is like, I'm at least 51% bad. No, you're like at least 51% good. I think most of us in a church would go, I'm going to church, I'm better than average, right? I'm 51 or better, right? But it's not the 51 or better that God goes, sure, come on into heaven, let's go. It's not being good enough, it's being graced enough, forgiven enough, made new enough in him. And that's actually the journey that takes place. And so when Peter was avoiding people that believed in God but just acted different than him, he was living from the wrong tree. Anybody else? You ever been there? I've been there. I've looked at myself that way. So it's not about being good enough. It's about being graced enough. And in verse 19, he says this, what actually took place is this. I tried keeping rules and working my head off to please God, and it didn't work. So I quit being a lawman so that I could be God's man. Who loves that line? I quit being a lawman so I could just be God's man. I quit trying to seek perfection just so that I could walk as a son. Just as a son. He loves me because of who I am, not what I've done. So I quit being a lawman so I could be God's man. And we all feel this tension between the law and grace. We all feel this tension between trying to please God and trying to walk in the grace of God. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he's like, do you ever have these seasons where you just feel like God is distant or you can't hear his voice, there's no connection? I said, yeah, absolutely I do. I'm sure you guys too, right? Like, I walk through that. And the more mature I grow in my faith as a believer, is I realize that when I can't hear God or I feel like he's distanced from me, it's not him that left, it's me that moved, right? And it's usually that I can't hear him because I'm starting to look at him a little differently than I did before. He's not my father who loves me, that wants to be with me. I'm trying to please him out of my own abilities and trying to just say, God, am I doing enough right things to be right with you? Anybody? And so when I realize that I'm not hearing him clearly, I realize I'm in the wrong tree and I need to go back. I realize that I'm not acting like a son, I'm acting like a slave. And I need to find freedom in him all over again to walk out this new, fresh faith. So, what do we do? How do we kind of stay on one side permanently? We do this. We die. There has to be a death. And that's what Galatians tells us. The next verse, verse 20, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. This earthly body, not living for that. Anybody else have an earthly body they'd like to leave behind? Right, yeah. But it's not just this earthly, it's like this desire, sin, this passion and the things that are just contrary to what God has. I can leave those behind too, right? And in the pain that I've collected over this life of hurts and relationships and memories and situations, I can nail that to the cross. I can leave that on the cross with Jesus as well. And the things that I fell short on, the decisions I made that weren't right, that I feel guilty over, and there's shame and there's condemnation, all that, I can also die to that too, because I can leave that on the cross because he took that for me and gave me new life in him. I can leave it all behind. And that's what he's talking about here. Paul's saying, I've been crucified with Christ. I'm going to live in Christ, no longer living for myself, but it's living for him. And notice when I said, all right, it's time for all of us to, if we're never going to go back, what do we got to do? We got to die. Nobody was like, amen. Like, anybody? Nobody said that. But why didn't we say that? Because we'd rather God fix our situation than change us. Right? Let's look at this in the book of Matthew. From that time on, this is towards the end of Jesus' ministry, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. So this is the plan. He's telling them, here's the plan, guys. I'm gonna go to Jerusalem, and the leaders there, they're gonna kill me. Nail me to a cross, but on the third day, I'm gonna come back to life. Like, it's so clear, right here, so clear. But that isn't what the disciples wanted to hear. Because at this time, the disciples were thinking Jesus was gonna overthrow the Romans, the rulers at that time. They were oppressive. They were hurting the Jewish people. So they're like, oh, cool, Jesus is going to make us feel better by overthrowing the Romans, and we're going to have a new kingdom here on earth, and we're going to be wealthy because, we're like his right-hand man, right? Like, we're right here. So this is going to be awesome. So Jesus, when we go to Jerusalem, I need you to kick some butt and take some names so that we can be like rulers together, right? So let's do this. And Jesus is like, no, I'm going there to die. And they didn't want to hear it. Even, look at this. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. You guys get the irony of this, right? Jesus is the Son of God, creator of heaven and earth and everything under earth. And Peter's like, you're doing it wrong, man. Let me fix it for you. I got to tell you, when I have wrong motivations, I start telling God what to do. When I'm not right with him, I start going, okay, God, here's the plan. You ready? I'll do my part, you do yours, but you got to come through, okay? Like, anybody else do that? I tell God what to do sometimes, and then I realize I shouldn't do that, and okay. Because the idea was that he didn't want Jesus to die. He goes, never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. And Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Dude, how would you like to be Peter right now? You are a stumbling block to me because, look at this, you do not have the mind of the things of God. They're not in your mind, but the things of men. You're not thinking the things that God gives, but you're thinking the things of men. If we're going to die to self, we're going to die to the world, we're going to nail things to the cross, we are exchanging the way I think for the way he thinks. Even if I don't understand everything he says or he does, I'm going to nail it to the cross. And so Jesus says to him, this is it. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will find it. So here's the deal. If we live this crucified life, there's nothing that the world could actually throw at you that's going to hurt, that's going to slow you down. Because there's nothing of this world that's of any value to you because you've already nailed it to the cross. Now, will it sting for a minute? I bet. But as I nail it to the cross, I'm going to find healing and freedom in him. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to walk in the grace and the power that God has given me because I've already nailed all those things to the cross. So, most people would rather hear a message about how the world around them needs to change than a message about how they need to change. But here at Refresh, we don't do things that way. We do things, hey, I'm going to change so I can change the world. I'm going to discover my purpose so I can make a difference in the world around me. I'm going to be refreshed by him so that I can go out in the world and bring refreshing to the people around me. I'm going to start with me. I'm going to change the world around me. So here's, if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. Most of us want change situations. God wants to change us. He does. You're like, God, get me out of here. And he goes, no, man, you're in the perfect place to become who I called you to be. But if I got you out of there, you'd never become that good person. That person that I called you to be, that destiny for you, the purpose for you. You'd never learn that lesson. You'll just be the same person. How many of you guys have ever gotten sick of a job, left that job, and went to a new job, only to realize that new job has the same problems as the old job? And so you quit that job and you go to the next job and you go to that job and you're like, okay, it's good for a little while. But then you realize that manager is also a terrible person. And then you make the decision every manager is terrible, and all the while it's been you. Now you're not raising your hand on that one, I know. Hey, those of you who are single and dating, same story. There are no good men in this town. Well, I'm just going to spitball for a minute. Maybe they were right, but you were wrong. Looking for Mr. Right, but you weren't Mrs. Right. Or you were looking for Mrs. Right, but you weren't Mr. Right. Get right so you can find right. Does it make sense? Okay, I offended everybody. Let's keep moving. Let's go. Just thinking out loud. If my husband would just, if my wife would just, it's all the same. It applies to all of us. My kids never. Parents, shh. Come on. Romans chapter 6, verse 6 and 7 says this, for we know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin, because anyone who has died has been freed from sin. Sin wants to cling to you and hang on to you, but if I've died, it's over. I'm finding freedom in him like never before. So I've got 3 quick things from the book of Galatians that I want you to kind of put into your life, okay? And I'm kind of running out of time here. I try to keep our services like tight. I don't like to preach too long because like I want you to come back, right? Like leave you wanting more, come back later. Okay, so I'm gonna go 3 things real quick. You guys ready for this? Taking notes, got your pens, got your phones, good. All right, number 1, I gotta crucify self. It's gotta be gone, it's gotta be on the cross, it's gotta be out of the way. Paul already wrote about this in the Galatians verses we read. He said, I've been crucified with Christ. I have, it's me, I'm gone. The TJ personality is not taking over, it's him. 1 Corinthians 15:31 says this, I die every day. You're going, well, what does that mean? What does it sound like? Here's what it sounds like. It sounds like, God, Father, I come to you right now, and I've got so many things that I'm looking at and chasing after and distractions and ambitions. And I just, so much of me wanting so many things, and God, I die to all of that. And I give you my whole heart and everything I am. I give you my eyes. May I see what you've called me to see, God. I give you my hands. May they be put to work in the places that you want me to work. I give you my feet. I surrender them to you. I want to go where you want me to go. I want to do the things you want me to do. I'm dying to the things of my own desires and passions, my own things, ambitions. It's all gone. I surrender it all to you. And today I walk to live out the beauty and the calling and the majesty that you've put in this place on me, that I can walk out and be your people, to be your son, and to expand your kingdom as an heir with Christ. That's what I want to do today, Lord. Amen. And then walk out with that attitude. That's what I want to do. That's what dying to self is. John 3:30, we hear John the Baptist say this, he must become greater and greater. He's referring to Jesus. I must become less and less. If you don't want to pray that whole long prayer that I just prayed, pray that. God, be greater and greater, and I'll be less and less. I'll let you take the front seat. I'll take the back, right? So here's your homework, action step. Choosing humility. Again, no more amens. They're gone. They're like, you're like, how could humility help? Humility will change the way you look at everything. And you're like, how can that actually bring freedom in my life? Humility will bring more freedom to your life than just about anything else you do. It really will. So take the step, humility. Not humiliation. Humiliation is forced humility. You didn't choose it. Choosing humility is much better than humiliation, amen? All right, number 2, I'm gonna crucify what the Bible calls my flesh. My flesh, not like my literal physical flesh, but the desire of the flesh, my own ambitions, my own desires, and the things that I kind of crave, right? My body craves things, my spirit craves things, my soul craves things, my emotions crave things. Galatians 5:24. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. Like, I have passions and desires. How about you? And here's one of the biggest lies that the world around us tells us. If you feel it, do it and you'll feel good. Isn't that a lie? I'm telling you right now, if I did everything I felt, I wouldn't be your pastor, I'd be a prisoner. Anybody else like that? Just because you feel it doesn't make it right. That needs to be crucified. Not every emotion I feel is true, not every thought I have is right. I am not the authority, even in my own life, because I get confused and my emotions get tangled and things get messed up. And so I crucify them to that cross and I say, God, what should I be doing? How should I be walking? How should I be thinking? And in that, I found more joy and freedom than any emotion or desire I've ever had, because there's more freedom there. So we all have those things. So if you've been following and chasing your passions and your feelings, I got a question. How's it working? Is it working good? You chase down that desire. Did it work? Did it work long term? Did it meet the need within you, or is you just kind of get hungry again? Jesus says, come to me. I'm the bread of life. Eat, and you'll never be hungry again. Somebody say amen. Amen. So here's your homework. Here's your action step. Choices. Decisions, not responses to feelings or emotions, choices. I want you to pre-decide what it is you're going to do in any given situation. Pre-decide to go with God's word instead of your own ideas. Pre-decide that your schedule isn't going to be controlled by anything else besides him. Pre-decide that your money's going to be that way, your energy's going to be that way, your voice and your resources, your giftings are all his. Pre-decide right now, the choice. I'm going to default to you, God. That's my choice. That's your homework. Don't let desires drive you, but let your choices to follow him drive you. And then number 3, final thing, is crucify the world. I don't need everything in this world. How about you? I mean, I got to be honest. I love a lot of things. I've actually found myself in a place where I have too many hobbies that I like. Anybody else ever get there? Like, I was like, man, I don't have anything to do with my life. And I'm like, all I do is like teach and preach. And that's good. I love that. It's just, but you need to have something else. You know what I'm saying? So I started to find some other things. And I've been fly fishing and I love it. And I bought a canoe and I've been canoeing. I love it. And I bought a 67 GMC and I've been working on it and I love it. And I've made some friends that play golf and I love it. You know, and I go out hiking and you know what? I love that too. And then we bought these like vintage bikes that I want to ride on the green belt and I love that one too. And we started a garden and I didn't love that one as much because it died, but it was fine. It's fine. It's fine. But I do have some trees, like my peach tree, the fruit was just delicious. I'm like nurturing these trees like they're my baby child. Like it's something's there. I love it. But none of these things that I love are worth anything compared to what he's given me. None of it. I love it all, but it is nothing compared to what he has given. Another final verse from the book of Galatians says this, Galatians 6:14. May I never boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. I need a world filter. I need to filter out some things that don't belong. I need to make sure that everything that enters my life enters for the right reasons. So that's changing just the way that I live my life. Am I in the world? You bet. Do I love the people? You bet. Does all of it come inside me? No. So here's your action step. Separation. Some of us, in order for us to live in actual freedom, there needs to be something cut off because it's been holding you back. There's something that needs to be put on that cross in your life. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a desire. Maybe it's whatever it is. For me, when I first became a Christian, I loved Jesus and I loved money like real close. Like it was real close between them, maybe a little more, you know? And I was like, God, I'm gonna be so rich that I don't have to deal with people anymore. Anybody else ever think that? Like I'm more of an introverted person. I'm like, if I get a big enough house with enough property or a boat that's big enough that I can go far enough away, then I'll truly be happy. But God dealt with me and that got nailed to the cross. And now the greatest joy of my life is the people in my life. I'm telling you right now, there are some things in you that need to get nailed to that cross. This is what Jesus prayed over you at the end of his life. You remember the prayer he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane and it's right before the cross and it's recorded in the book of John, and it says this in chapter 17. Jesus is saying this about you. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. He said, yeah, you live in the world, and he's not gonna take you out of every situation, but he wants to keep you safe in it. He wants you to be connected to him in it. And he wants you to take the world and he wants you to filter it out and go, we're gonna put that on the cross. And for all of us, there's something that needs to end on a cross today. I know that. So today we're gonna take a moment, we're gonna pray. Can you guys close your eyes, bow your heads? No one moving around, no noises. I just want you to guys have a reflection point with God. Have a moment where you hear from him, and I want you to ask yourself the question, if this thing was out of my life, separated, how much closer would I be to God? What is the thing? What is the desire? What is the person? What fill in the blank. If that was gone, man, I feel like that's the thing. All right, well, that's your next step. You got to die to it. So right now, I know everybody's kind of doing their own thing, listening for the Holy Spirit, the voice of God in you. For some of us, we've never actually surrendered our life the first time to him so that I could actually live in freedom at all. I've been trying to find freedom in a lot of different things, but all those things never actually bring freedom. They just escape. I just escape for a moment. And then the problem comes back, and the desire comes back, and the pain comes back, and freedom only comes permanently through him. And you are his son, his daughter, and he loves you so very much. And he's already given everything for you. All we have to do is receive. So today, if you've never done that, that's what I want you to do, is just receive. Receive him. Receive what he has. You pray something like this: Father, today I surrender everything I am to you. I want to rearrange my desires, and I want to put them behind your desires. My ambitions behind yours, my feelings, well, I don't even need, just following you in first place. I give you everything I am, God, because I know that I'll find more joy there than anywhere else, more freedom there than anywhere else. So today, God, I surrender it all to you. Thank you, Father. In your name we pray. Everybody says, amen.